question comes from Deborah Ann, and it is, what do we do with our dogs that need grooming, but they're too weak to stand on the groomer's table for too long? This comes at a perfect time because I'm actually on my way with my dog, Sam, to get groomed. So there she is, sort of excited. She's actually just more excited to get in the car. So Sam is nearly 13 years old, and I'm blessed because she's actually still in pretty good condition. She doesn't have too much mobility issues. She is slowing down, and she can tolerate being in the groomers for longer periods. But I do know that those dogs with the spaghetti legs, and they could barely stand in front of their food bowl long enough, let alone on a groomer's table. So it's really important that when your pet does need grooming, that we don't just let them sit around stinky, because sometimes that could lead to other problems. And grooming is still very important to help keep the human-animal bond and them in the house and smelling good and looking good and their fur going all over and preventing mats and things like that. So without further ado, let's get Sam into the groomer. I would definitely suggest finding a really good groomer. Now that sometimes can be a challenge, because how do you know what's a good groomer or not? So definitely ask to take a tour of their facility. Ask what they do with geriatric pets. Have they even thought of such a thing? If you have a groomer that actually has a policy for geriatric pets, that's a great first step. When I was working in general practice and we had pets coming in for grooming, I always wanted to make sure that there was almost like a yoga mat with holes at the bottom of it for the water to go through, a yoga mat placed at the bottom of the bathtub. So that gave them something to grip onto. Grip is so important. I can't tell you how many families I go to and their pet has mobility issues and they're just ice skating on tile floors. And all we need to do is put some bath mats or some yoga mats around, and it's a huge help. So if the pet could stand in the bathtub long enough with the mat, that is going to be a huge help, first of all. So if they don't have such a thing at your grooming facility, bring one with them. Number two is you want to make sure that they understand how fragile your pet is. So they need to understand that they might only have a 10-minute window when they're on the grooming table, that your pet could stand there and tolerate it, because they do have to stand very still. They have their little collars on, but that can get challenging for some of our older pets. So having a braking system, and that's why talking to your groomer and making sure that they understand this is so important. And actually, stopping for a quick potty break is also really important to make sure that they're not sitting in their cage needing to go to the bathroom. Also, being gentle with our fragile little egg dogs, right? So I don't want them lifting the legs to try to shave underneath their legs and, too aggressively. So just to be very ginger with your pet, they are fragile, and so letting them know that this is an issue. Now, another thing is that sometimes not all dogs are like Sam, who's kind of excited to be in the car and nothing gets in her way of happiness. So she's not too anxious to go to the groomer, but I know a lot of pets that are anxious to either get in the car or go to the groomer. So we don't want to tranquilize our pets, because we do need them standing up and being alert and things like that, but maybe something to help them out with a little bit of anxiety. And so I love Adaptil spray. I love Adaptil collars. So those are just pheromone sprays. There's also Rescue Remedy, which is some drops that you can give your pet maybe 2 or 3 hours before they go to the groomers to help with the anxiety. We don't want them staying there too long. So what about asking your groomer when is the slowest day during the week? Because we want the least amount of activity going on, dogs barking, things like that. Ask them to be picked up right away. Like as soon as they're done, know that you can go pick them up and bring them home and get them back to their normal activity. So it is time to pick up Sam, and I totally forgot to mention a really great option also, and that would be mobile groomers. There could be a great mobile groomer in your area, so that way they can come to your house. That way that your pet doesn't have to stress about getting in the car and going somewhere else and being in a cage with a lot of other animals nearby. The only problem with a mobile groomer is that they probably won't be able to give as much rest periods. So just something to consider. But I love mobile groomers too, and you're always nearby if they have any questions or anything like that. So anyway, let's go get Sam. There she is. Hi, Sam. All right, so Sam is done with the groomer and back in her car. And I did want to point out a few things about her car. First of all, I do have an SUV, so it's a little bit harder for her to get into as she's getting older, but she can still make the jump. But what I've done is I put a bath mat down here, and I actually pull out a little bit so that way she doesn't struggle on the bumper. And so then once she's in, I'll kind of flop it over like that, so that way I can close the door. But I like to make sure that she has easy access. And then I like to pull up next to a curb and then get closer to the ground, so that way it's at least, you know, 4 inches less than she'd have to try to jump on her own. So, so there's that. The other thing with Sam is that she's actually an Anatolian Shepherd. So an Anatolian Shepherd typically has a lot of fur. And so last month I had her shaved pretty short. I do that about 2 times a year because I know that I can't bring her to the groomer as often as I would like to. So if I cut her short, or I have them the groomers cut her short, because I cannot shave a dog really well, that way it doesn't mean that she has to go as often. So if you do get your dog shaved, maybe get a shorter cut so that way they don't have to go as often as possible. But I might be a little biased, but I think she looks good. What do you think about getting a treat? Sam's got she's got 1 speed, just 1. All right, I hope this was helpful, and thanks for your question. There's another one.